Okay, so it is Friday, December 31st, 2021. Um, Hello again. Here we are. Here we go. I was just listening to uh, eating breakfast, watching some YouTube videos, and there's been a lot of churn in the vlogosphere about the Thwaites Glacier, also called the Doomsday Glacier. Woo! Public relations for the Thwaites Glacier needs to be upped a little bit. But anyway, a good presentation. These are all highly technical presentations. The Thwaites Glacier is not something that the public have glommed onto, and this is a wonderful thing we should be doing PBS videos on yet. But it was a good presentation. Nothing I haven't seen already about the grounding line and how quickly the ice sheet is collapsing and why it's collapsing and when it might collapse. And of course, it doesn't help people's anxiety level to call it the Doomsday Glacier. Now, I think, however, that they're doing you a service by doing that, and scientists and researchers and the people who work with them and publish their work and support them are not famous for being emotionally charged and trying to stir up a lot of interest. I mean, there are people who do that because they have a book they're publishing or they're on a speaking tour or whatever, so they want to generate interest in the topic. But field scientists, geophysicists, biologists, they're pretty low-key bunch, right? So the fact that this thing is called the Doomsday Glacier by scientists, that's what they call it. They talk about it that way. The Thwaites Glacier, also called the Doomsday Glacier. Today we're going to talk about the Doomsday Glacier. The fact that they do that should give you a clue, right? That's a clue. They're giving you a little clue because that's how they're thinking about it. Now, this video is about optimism. I have stated in other videos, in particular, the one I did just before this about my reaction to Don't Look Up. Okay. And I'd been watching the video quite a bit. And after watching that video, I was really down. That movie, I shouldn't call it a video. It's a movie. Okay. I was really down. I still highly recommend it. But I mean, I can go through my day sort of ignoring all this. I have lots of little chores to do and some pretty serious heavy lifting engineering. But then, I sit down and I watch, Don't Look Up or a technical presentation on the Doomsday Glacier, and I get down. Okay. I'm a normal human being. And when I'm looking at essentially the end of my world as I have known, and I'm 62 years old, and I've known a lot of life. And for me to be looking at all of that ending, it's just, what are you supposed to feel, right? What are you supposed to feel? You tell me, okay? You go in the comments and you tell me what I'm supposed to feel about this, okay? I'm asking. So this woman has given a technical presentation on the Thwaites Glacier, and it was short and ended with a question session. And the first question, someone picked at random from the audience. So the first question, meaning it was maybe the first question for a lot of people in the audience, right? And they picked one at random, and it was the first question, was, do you have, the question was essentially, to paraphrase, and this question has come up a lot in presentations of this kind. If it's not the first question, maybe it's the second or third. Do you have something optimistic to tell us about your work, about your findings? Anything, something? And the woman, she said, exactly what you're supposed to say. The things that are happening in the system, is the Thwaites Glacier in this case, but it could be any other system, right? The Amazon rainforest, Greenland, ice stability and melting, and these kinds of things. The thawing of the permafrost, the shutdown of the AMOC, the whatever. Just pick something, right? The same question comes up. Excuse me, I have a question. do we have any cause for optimism here? Okay, so for any of those topics, same question comes up, and she handled it correctly, in my opinion, the best she could. And she says, well, we can't deny science. We can't deny what we're seeing. I'm not going to tell you that this isn't happening, because here it is. It's happening. I just showed you the data. 20-minute presentation, 40-minute presentation. You saw the data yourself. So let's not talk about, optimistically, maybe I'm wrong. Let's not have that discussion. So what could we say about this? What cause for optimism could we possibly pull from this? And so she said, she was very upfront about it. She smiled. She says, well, if we stop burning fossil fuels today, then this rolling disaster, whatever it is, okay, pick a topic, this rolling disaster, pick a topic, there's 50 of them, won't roll as far, as quickly, as broadly, won't affect as many people for as many generations into the future, right? If we stop burning fossil fuels today. Next question. All right. Now, there's a couple things I could say about that. I want to make the observation, first of all, that people are scrambling around, grasping at any semblance or reason to have optimism. You're a scientist. You just gave me all this data. I'm feeling really scared. I'm looking at this, and it's called the Doomsday Glacier, and you're saying it's going, and it's going to collapse, and we don't know if it's going to be 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, but it's going, and it's called the Doomsday Glacier, and I'm looking for some optimism here. Okay? So I guess that's a natural human thing, right? I'm a scientist. What? We're not trained to be optimistic about our work. We're just not, okay? The training, and if you have a master's degree or above, then you've gotten a lot of this, okay? You've gotten a lot of this. You've written a lot of papers in class peer review. You've had lots of discussions with professors. You've read a lot of papers. You've been to a lot of presentations where people talk about their work. And what you have drilled into your head is, okay, that's like programming. Stick to the facts. Stick to the facts. What did you see? What did you measure? Measurements, okay? What instruments were you using? Were your instruments properly calibrated? Do you have controls on your calibration? What's your QA and QC? And what about the labs you sent samples to? Do they have QA and QC? Do they publish their error rates, okay? Did you measure the thing you set out to measure? Did you transform your data correctly? Is the transformation well accepted in the peer review? When it came to complicated mathematics, did you bring in a mathematician to consult with you? Is a mathematician on your panel? Is a mathematician part of your publication? Are they a secondary, tertiary author, and so on? What about your sources? Did you review the sources? Are they typically reviewed? Are they sources commonly cited for your type of work? Are we all on the same page? Okay. There's no room for optimism in there. Well, I think I'm going to find unicorns in the Okefenokee swamp, and so I'm looking for unicorns, and therefore I'm expecting to find them. It's just no. That is not how we do this. And so when a researcher presents you with a bunch of data and says, this is what the data shows, it's melting at this rate, there's this much of it, this much water is going into the ocean should rise by this much over this amount of time, when they tell you all that, and then your first question is, hi, I have a question. Yeah. Is there any cause for optimism regarding your work? The answer, I mean, you can waffle and hand wave and whatnot and say, but the answer is, what I've presented with you is reality. Optimism is a feature of wishful thinking. Well, maybe it's not as bad. Well, maybe it's this other way. Well, maybe you're wrong, right? Because that's what's optimism. There's nothing to be optimistic about of the collapse of the Doomsday Glacier. There's nothing in there. Collapse, Doomsday. There's nothing in that sentence that says, oh, well, this is going to be great. Oh, but this is going to be a real party. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. The collapse of the Doomsday Glacier. No. No, I'm sorry. I have a question. Yes, what is it? Is there any cause for optimism with regards to your work? No. I mean, I might be wrong. That's why we do peer review. That's why we publish our methods, while we have discussions and in our papers about how we did things and why we did them and how we calibrated. We reveal all that in our papers. So, you could go look at my paper and say, well, you used the wrong machine, you didn't calibrate it correctly, you transformed the data in a wonky way. What's wrong with you? Then maybe we could be optimistic because I screwed up. Okay. Or you could say, well, I'm going to do the same work. I'm going to do it slightly differently. Yes, you can do that. You could do the same work slightly differently, and maybe you'll get a different result. That would be interesting. We'll all look at that and we'll compare. Here's this result. Here's that result. Something isn't quite adding up. We'll try to find out why. So that's maybe a cause for optimism, that people can go back out and do the work again. But I've done the work. I've presented the work. Here's the data. This is happening. And the Doomsday Glacier is headed for collapse. Any questions? Okay. Now, as far as I'm concerned, people raising their hand saying, excuse me, that this is all wonderful, but do you have any cause for optimism? Okay, asking that question, they are fundamentally detached from reality. Fundamentally detached. This is a big problem for a lot of people. Scientists go through a lot of rigorous training, and we learn a lot of topics. Okay, my master's degree is in biology with an emphasis on ecosystem analysis. A lot of math involved. I was writing computer software when computers were still Apple IIs. Okay, and that's how I got into computer engineering, and that's why I'm no longer a biologist. But the long story short, my trajectory through science and engineering is typical, not extraordinary at all, typical. You learn a lot, and you come at these things from all directions. You've got to have math, you've got to have chemistry, you've got to have physics, plus your core topic, whatever it is, glaciology, biology, hydrology, whatever it is. And so, when we're doing this work, we're bringing a lot of power from the human, from the entire collective human endeavor of acquiring knowledge, thousands of years. We bring a lot of power into this thing. That's our job. That's what we actually do. We just don't go out and turn rocks over like I was doing when I was 6 years old. Okay, turn the rock over. Ooh, creepy crawly. Isn't this cute? Look at this, Mom. Okay, we abandon that. We bring a lot of power to this stuff. And so when someone's presenting something, they're not just presenting their little piece of it. They're presenting a whole spectrum of analysis that just boils down to one little thing. The Doomsday Glacier, so-called, for good reason, is collapsing. Okay, one sentence worth of discussion is really an entire lifetime, and really hundreds of years of collective lifetimes of bringing together things. So we understand what's happening. We not because we're elites and we're anointed, and now you're special. Your opinion has more weight than somebody else's. We bring the weight of objective, we're hoping, human endeavor for hundreds, even thousands of years to every statement we try to make. And there's no room for optimism. There's just observation. That's all. If there was anything good we could say, we would say it. All the news on climate change for the last 5 years has become something of a joke that now runs through this community. It's a joke that we tell each other, kind of, laughing, whistling past the graveyard, trying to make the best of the situation. The joke meme is that every study that comes out has somewhere in the introduction, the summary, the high-level summary, these observations suggest the situation is worse than expected. It's happening faster than expected. It's coming sooner than expected. The impacts are wider and than expected. More is involved than we thought would be involved. And so on and so forth. And we've noticed this. Everybody with even a tangential relationship with this work knows that this has been the pattern. That everything we thought we kind of had a handle on, and we're going to go forward and research this more, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Now we're seeing, okay, we did the best we could with the data and the materials and methods we had, but now that we've gone back and looked at it again, we did not. It turns out that not only were we headed in the right direction, but on second examination or additional follow-up, it's actually worse than expected. Okay? It's worse than expected. Worse than we thought. It's worse than we thought it could be. Our worst case scenarios 5 years ago are now right in the center. Right in the center. A typical example. I don't know what it was. We've had, maybe it was actually the last IPCC report. So that would be AR5, Assessment Report 5. Might have even been 4. They were publishing recommended carbon emission cuts and where that would place us, and then they would put, and if we don't do anything, at all, then here's the business as usual trajectory. It was always way up high, right? Okay, so there's all these things we could do, and we might be down here going down, we might be here going across. And if we don't do anything, we could be up here going up and getting worse. Okay, and then the next time they publish a report, the joke is, oh yeah, this line up here that we thought was like impossible, and there's no way that humanity would still be consuming fossil fuels at that level or disturbing the system at that rate. That's now normal. This high level unlikely pathway that we said would be like, that's the worst case scenario, right? The worst case scenario. What's the worst case scenario when you get on a jet? Well, the jet flies into a mountainside, right? Okay, well, what if it turns out that every jet that takes off flies into a mountainside? Well, then there's something really wrong, right? Your worst case scenario is actually what always happens. Jets always fly into mountainsides. Okay, well, that's a bad example because jets do not always fly into mountainsides. But let's say that, you're looking at a system and you're trying to understand it, and the worst case scenario is the equivalent of a jet flies into a mountainside. And then you get on a jet and it flies into a mountainside. Okay, so maybe that wasn't the worst case scenario. Maybe that's just what happens. And so we're running into situations increasingly, in fact, almost every single time, that when we come back and look at it a second time, when we look at the Thwaites Glacier 5 years from now, when we look at Greenland 5 years from now, when we look at the permafrost in Siberia and northern Canada 5 years from now, the papers that come out are going to be saying things like, well, compared to what we thought was happening 5 years in the past, back in 2021 or 2020, it's faster than expected. 5 years later, our worst case scenario is now actually what happened. The melt, the rate is what we thought was like outlandish and would never happen. It happened, it really happened. All the things that we thought were highly unlikely events, actually those events all took place. Are highly unlikely is actually what happened. The jets flew into mountainsides. Who knew, right? Everybody's scrambling around, grasping at straws, trying to find a reason to be optimistic. So I'm going to paraphrase. I think it's a paraphrase. The astronomer guys, Tyson Green, when he says, the universe is under no obligation to solve your problems for you. Okay? The universe is under no obligation to solve your problems for you. That is probably one of the more critical observations regarding the universe that I've ever heard. Okay, and I keep coming back to it all the time in my discussions with people. Yeah, you want an optimistic story? Well, guess what? The universe is not under any obligation to solve your problem for you. You want this to go away? Well, guess what? You want a better story than the story I just told you, based on data and observations and measurements and peer review? Well, guess what? There might not be one. There doesn't have to be an optimistic story here. There doesn't have to be a Hollywood happy ending here. If you go watch the movie, Don't Look Up, not Hollywood happy ending, okay? The universe is under no obligation to provide an optimistic narrative for you at all, okay? It's data, folks. It's physics. It's Earth dynamics. It's stuff we barely understand. Certainly not well enough to understand how this could work out great for us. We're making a lot of observations, making a lot of determinations. We're sharing our data. We're pulling data as rapidly as we can. And it's not good. It's not good. That's one of the reasons why scientists are in trouble with politicians and economists. You know, they fund our work, and we go to the Antarctic and we study the Thwaites Glacier, and we come back and we say, yeah, that's not going to work. That's going to melt, and that's going to be, whatever, 9 feet of sea level rise or whatever it is. Actually, it's more like 20 inches sea level rise. And that's the truth. And now I'm going back to my classroom to teach my students and do my professorial work, right? Thanks for the funding, and there's your data. And they're like, I didn't pay you to come back with a sob story. I didn't pay you to come back with bad news. Can't you frame this in an optimistic way? Because, if it's going to be pessimistic, like the Thwaites Glacier is going to melt, and the ice shelf that's holding it back is going to collapse, and all that land-based ice is going to flow into the sea and raise the sea level by 20 inches, and potentially quite quickly, right? That's no. What? Go back to your whiteboard and redo this with a more optimistic scenario. And scientists are actually doing that. I've seen many examples. Sometimes it's just in YouTube videos where they have what we call the obligate sunset picture. It's another joke in scientific circles. When you've been doing field work and you come back from your field work and you do a slideshow, the last slide has to be a combination of either a group photo of the people who went on the expedition or a beautiful panoramic sunset shot of the place where he did the work. The ice sheet at sunset, the Amazon rainforest at sunset, the sunset picture, right? And it's a kind of self-censoring that we do that. So, I had all this bad information in the presentation, but here's a beautiful picture of the permafrost at sunset. We'll leave you with that. Okay? Well, I that's what you do when you just unloaded some really bad news on people. That's what you do. Beautiful sunset picture. Let's frame this just right. Okay. The Hollywood happy ending. That's what it is. And we have to get over this fixation on tell me the good part. Skip the bad part, or go through that quickly. Now give me the good news. What's the good news? There's good news, right? You just said all this bad news. Now I'm feeling really bad about myself. I'm worried about my children. I need to get home and hug my children. Give me some good news before I walk out of here, okay? Why? What if it's not good? What if there just isn't any good news? The Thwaites Glacier called the Doomsday Glacier. Woohoo. Clue number one is collapsing. And there's really nothing to stop it from collapsing. There's really nothing. There's really no unknowns at this point. Okay. Same thing with Greenland. Someone did a determination, I think it was a year ago. It feels like it was about a year ago, that the conditions on Greenland are such that it's going to go. It's going to melt. Now, it could take 1,000 years, but it could take 100 years. And, and in the meantime, every year it melts a little bit, right? And that all goes into the oceans and all causes sea level rise. And the Thwaites Glacier will give you 20 inches. And if you're, that's just how it is now. That's what's on deck for us. There's no optimistic scenario where these things don't happen. I mean, any cause for optimism might be, well, it doesn't happen in my lifetime. Okay, well, so you got that, right? It's not going to happen in your lifetime. I'm 62. It won't happen in my lifetime. Maybe. It's just a narrative. It's just an optimistic narrative. Maybe it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but maybe it does, right? So you want a good, you want a feel good story? Sure, all these things are happening and they're not going to happen in your lifetime. Now, some people, that makes them feel really great. It's not happening in my lifetime. Phew. Wow, I dodged a bullet there. Okay, party. Beers are on me, all right? Well, but if you're a more well-adjusted person, that is not a cause for optimism. It's not happening in your lifetime at 62. What about the child that was just, delivered down the street at the general hospital to a loving, adoring parents, and the future is in their hands, literally, little squirming pink piece of the future, and your optimistic narrative, well, it's not going to happen in my time, doesn't apply to that child. That child is going to have to endure these things. And if that child ends up living in South Florida, that child is going to have a problem. Okay? Well, really, if that child is living really anywhere, that child is going to have a problem, because the disruptions that are come from even 20 inches of sea level rise from the Doomsday Glacier. The disruption that will come from that will span the globe. Span the globe. There is no reason to think you're going to escape that. That is the height of hubris, to think that you are going to be somehow isolated, insulated from these calamities because of what? Your skin color, the amount of money you have, how high you live in a penthouse, or how big is your circle of wealthy friends? I mean, what do you think is going to insulate you from this? I suppose if you're Jeff Bezos and you've got a reusable rocket in your backyard, and you got enough money to build yourself a space station for your personal use, well, then I guess you have an escape narrative. I guess you can start to think, well, yeah, maybe I can get off planet and just avoid all this. So maybe that works for Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Bill Gates and the others. Which, by the way, was the subtext of the movie Don't Look Up. Yeah, they had a plan. They had a reason for optimism in the face of reality. They had a reason for optimism, but it was very personal. I'm going to be fine. And maybe you, given your social situation and your financial situation, maybe you personally will be fine. But that, 7-pound squirming pink thing just delivered at the general hospital has no such basis for optimism. No such basis. And if I'm giving a presentation on the Doomsday Glacier, and a woman who happens to be holding a baby, nursing a baby, says, "I have a question. Don't you have an optimistic story about your work here for the rest of us?" And I look at her, I look at her baby, and I'm thinking, no, I don't. Because I know what you're thinking when you're holding your baby and your baby's nursing. When you ask that question, I know what you're thinking as a mother as a woman. You're thinking about your child. You're thinking about, you don't need an optimistic scenario for yourself. Your thoughts are actually on your child, and I don't have a story for you. There is no basis for optimism. There is no logical basis, and there's no moral basis for optimism at all. So if you're, a glaciologist or a biologist or a geochemist or glacial, whatever you are, and someone asks you, "Wow, that was a pretty sad story. Do you have any, lesson of optimism for us? Anything optimistic you could say about this?" Your answer should be no. No, I don't. The data, the observations don't lend themselves to an optimistic interpretation. It's going to be rough. For some people, this is going to be lethal. For, species and for planetary, for planetary boundaries and regional ecosystems, this is going to be abundantly lethal. Entire cultures are going to be wiped out by this. Coastal cities are going to be wiped out. Certain places of the planet are going to become uninhabitable, and the people and cultures and their entire reality that are in these locations will have to either survive moving or just be lost. And there is no reason for optimism. There just isn't. So no, I'm not optimistic. Every single day I'm not optimistic. And it doesn't even matter if we stop burning fossil fuels and we all get electric cars, and I could go on for another hour. How long is this? 30 minutes. I could go on for another half an hour just explaining all the ways in which converting our rolling fleet to electric vehicles is not, absolutely not, foursquare, no way is it a cause for optimism, even if we could do that, which we probably can't. Okay? And it's not because I'm against EVs or I love my great big truck and, going down the road, rolling coal. That's not why. It's because, based on data and observations, there is no good reason for optimism. I occupy my thoughts with coping. I'm an engineer, and so for me, addressing problems and tackling issues, I take an engineer's approach to these things. Okay, I don't come on here on YouTube and spew hopium and apocalyptimism and all this kind of stuff. I go about trying to position myself, as I like to say it, position myself relative to this steamroller called global heating and climate change. I try to position myself for optimal survival. That's all I'm doing right now. That's all I'm doing. I'm not doing outreach to anybody except this and you. I do it in the comfort of my home, and it takes me as much time as I want to spend on it, and then I'm done, right? I'm not doing any outreach. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm installing solar power with batteries off-grid, digging underground cisterns for water storage. We're doing our gardening. I'm going to add rooms to my property so that I can house additional family members, or maybe, earn some income from it, or a little bit of both. I'm just trying to position myself so that I'm okay. My family can be okay. Friends and family can be here. And, maybe when things go really sideways, if they do during my lifetime, then we can ride it out. Maybe. I'm calling this project an Earth Ark. I don't think I coined the term. I think I picked it up from somewhere, but it's kind of a riff on the idea of Noah's Ark. Not that you're going to be a hardened perimeter with all of your guns and your meals ready to eat in your concrete bunker, but just that you're going to create as much resilience and buffering as you can. And I could talk about why off-grid solar is important. I could talk about why water sequestration is important, and all these other things, rooftop gardens, the whole thing. I could talk about that. But realistically, nobody's going to do those things. I'm the only one going to do those things because I do not have an optimistic narrative. Nope. The most optimistic thing I can hope for is that me and mine can ride this out. I'm 62. 20 years of remaining life is not out of the question. And by 20 years, like 10 years, you and I are not going to recognize this planet. We're just not going to recognize it within 10 years, maybe even 5 years. It's already really bad. The suburbs of Denver caught fire yesterday, and 600 homes burned down, and we don't even know how many people died. Okay, another $1 billion weekend, really, another $1 billion loss on top of the West Kentucky tornado outbreak. That was $1 billion or more, and the heat dome that perplexed the Pacific Northwest, that was $1 billion. And now, of course, all the atmospheric rivers, that's another $1 billion. And it just doesn't end, and it's not going to end, and it's going to continue to get worse. It can't do anything else. The Thwaites Glacier, the Doomsday Glacier, is going to collapse. Greenland is going to melt, barring a miracle. The Siberian permafrost is going to melt. The fires are going to burn every summer, or these days, even in the winter. And there's just no reason for optimism. It's none. So figure out where you're supposed to be and who you're supposed to be with, and fix that. Fix it. That was another interesting subtext for Don't Look Up. You began to realize that the most intelligent thing that happened was when the protagonists decided to just be with family. And they were sitting around having a meal together and talking about which is better, store-bought pie or homemade pie, and the importance of grinding your own coffee and just being together and holding hands, and that was their decision. When they realized there was no optimistic narrative. Be where you need to be and with whom you need to be with, and you have some control of those two. You have control of those two things. So make those happen for you and for the people that are important to you. Make those things happen. And you'll have 50 reasons why you can't be with these people, and 50 more reasons why you can't be, where they are. And it's just a game you're playing with yourself. When the fires are raging through your neighborhood or the tornadoes are raining down terror, then are you where you're supposed to be and with whom you're supposed to be with? Or are they alone enduring something similar or worse and you're not there? So I guess if I had some optimistic takeaway, is that is something you can do. You can't stop the Doomsday Glacier from collapsing into the sea. And you can't stop Greenland from melting. And you can't stop the thaw of the permafrost. And you can't stop the tornado outbreaks. And you can't stop the wildfires. And you can't stop the crop failures. And you can't stop the torrential floods. Okay? But you can be where you need to be, with whom you need to be with, when all that happens, when all that goes down. You can do that. And you think you can't. I'm telling you, you can. You have my permission, and it is in your power to do these things. So to the question, excuse me, do you have any reason for optimism regarding your work? The short answer is no. If there was anything wrong with my work, I would have presented that. It stands as given. But the one thing that you and I can do, regardless of all that I've presented and all that is happening in the world, is that you and I have the capability, the capacity to be where we need to be right now, with whom we need to be with to ride this out. Or in the event that you don't write it out, to be with each other at the end. That you can do that. You can be with each other at the end, if that's what you want to do. On the optimistic side, you can be where you need to be with who you need to be with at the end. So you got that. You got that going for you. That's all I'm going to say on optimism. I know it's not very optimistic. Yeah. Well, it isn't.